This is going to be, I guess, a little bit different than I expected. If people aren't as familiar with LEED, then I may spend a little bit more time talking about things. What's different and what's the same might not be as significant to you, so it will all be different. But I will try to just show some of the comparisons between where we're currently at and where LEED version 4 is going. We don't have a lot of time to go credit by credit into very explicit detail with project examples and calculations, etc. So if you want to have that discussion, retain yourself a good LEED consultant, and we can do that. We're just going to be providing a very sort of high-level overview of the change to LEED version 4. Again, by way of introduction, MMM is a large consulting engineering firm. We're across the country. We have a little over 2,000 staff, and we have representatives in all of the major sectors. I think several people in the room and in this area might be familiar with our infrastructure work or heavy civil or environmental, but we also have a very large buildings group, of which I'm part, and we do a lot of community development and transportation and infrastructure. Again, this is just sort of set the context. It's not a promo pitch, just to give you a sense of what's going into the presentation. The most recent addition, which now is over 4 years ago, it was when we acquired Intermodal Engineering, one of the largest green building consultants in Canada. And so we've integrated that into the MMM delivery process, and I would say in the building sector, we're doing a lot of green on every project, and we're doing design charrettes and things sort of as a matter of course, trying to infuse as much of our design process as possible with sustainable design principles. And we cover all primary services in buildings as well. Also, just by way of personal introduction, I manage our building science group in Toronto and in Halifax. And I have done LEED consulting in the past, which is why I'm speaking to LEED version 4 today. But my primary day-to-day business is high-performance buildings and the building science behind them. Okay, so why is LEED confusing? It started out many years ago as LEED version 1 and quickly spawned several different versions in several different countries, including Canada. And it just sort of kept growing. So different versions, different years, different monikers. You have LEED for new construction, you have LEED for existing buildings, you have LEED for commercial interiors, core and shell, neighborhood development, schools, healthcare, you name it, there's a LEED rating system for it. So the landscape is quite confusing. It also required that, or it also became common for green building councils to develop their own version of LEED, as we have in Canada. So you can see that from LEED version 1 came LEED BC for British Columbia, then came LEED version 1 in Canada, then LEED version 1.1 new construction and core and shell, and then LEED 2009. The idea of LEED version 4 is to basically get rid of that confusion, provide one rating system, version 4, and have it apply to all sectors. There are still rating systems for interior design, like tenant fit-up type work. There's still a rating system version 4 for existing buildings, but for new construction, whether it's healthcare, schools, hospitality, commercial, you name it, LEED version 4, and the name is BD plus C, which is building, design, and construction. So if you see a person who has a LEED AP, their LEED accredited professional designation, if they're a specialist in new construction, it will say LEED AP, BD plus C. So that will be their designation. If they're an existing building specialist, it will say LEED AP, O&M. So you can start to see how people specialize in different versions of LEED. I don't know, did that make it less confusing? I don't think it did. Anyways, so this is, LEED version 4 covers all of these building types. So it's one rating system for all these different building types, as opposed to having LEED healthcare or LEED schools. It's all under one branch. And then the other LEED versions for different types of Existing buildings are obviously very different from new construction, so there's a separate LEED rating system for that. How will we be submitting LEED projects? So the traditional path is you assemble all of your documentation. We used to print it and ship giant 3-inch ring binders halfway across the country for evaluation. Put it on a CD, mail it off, and get that reviewed by the review team. The process going forward will be electronic, so it will be LEED online. The only challenge right now is that it's only available in English. So if you're working on a project in a good part of the country where French is the primary language, you'll still be doing a hard copy submission through CAGBC in French, and they'll be reviewing that. We talked a lot about glass condos and glass buildings and how, no matter which city you go to, all the buildings look the same. And we kind of lament that fact. So why are we applying a LEED standard or a LEED rating system across all regions? We're not exactly. So the second point here is that local green building councils, like Canada Green Building Council or the India Green Building Council, or no matter where you are, green building councils develop their alternative compliance paths for their jurisdiction. So in Canada, the CAGBC, the Canada Green Building Council, has established and issued in June of last year alternative compliance paths for projects in Canada for LEED version 4. So the LEED reference guide that you use will be the same if you're working on a project anywhere across Canada, in the US, overseas, it doesn't matter. But there might be alternative compliance paths for projects based on their jurisdiction. And I'll get specific on a couple of credits so you can see what the implication of that is. And as I mentioned at the bottom, CAGBC it says currently, but they have already developed alternative compliance paths, and that is an ongoing process. And that's all run through the tags, so the technical advisory groups. Technical advisory groups advise on the technical aspects. They're groups of people that advise on technical aspects, which kind of wraps up nicely into the word tag, for each of the different things. So whether it's energy or water or community or indoor environmental quality. Okay, so here's a snapshot of the two different rating systems and the credit categories. Right off the bat, LEED version 2009, there is no first category. That's interesting. Well, in fact, there's a new category in LEED version 4 called the integrative process. So we heard about the integrated project delivery model earlier in the day. This is not that. It can be that. That's quite an involved process and a very specific process that is contractually binding and et cetera, et cetera. I won't reproduce David's excellent presentation. But there is an integrated delivery process that will get you a point in LEED version 4. So it's having several members at the table and doing like an integrated design charrette. Sustainable sites has changed to two different things: location and transportation, and sustainable sites. So these credits have kind of been split out into two categories. Water efficiency is the same, energy and atmosphere. The rest basically remain the same. The credits within them change, but the categories stay the same. What about points, thresholds, and certification levels? They're there for you to read. So the new point scale is 100 points plus 10 optional points in both innovation and regional priority. The certification bands are in logical groups of 10. If you're familiar with the earlier versions of LEED, it was, I can't even remember. 28 to, or 30 to 38 was certified, and 40 to, it's just kind of all over the place. So it was really hard to remember. This is a little bit easier to remember. It's in groups of 10, except for gold, I guess, groups of 20. The idea behind LEED version 4, which I think is a good idea and sort of moves the market in a positive direction, is promoting positive aspects of projects. The long and short of LEED version 4 is that good performing buildings will still be rewarded with good, good LEED certification levels. That doesn't change. But rather than trying to minimize these negative impacts, the idea is to try to promote positive impacts. So it's just kind of a mind shift, right? If you see your world in a positive light, promote the positives as opposed to punishing the negatives. There are different credit weightings based on your project type, because different project types have different environmental impacts. In healthcare, energy is a lot more important than it is in a school, because the processes are much more energy intensive. So they give more energy points to healthcare buildings, because there's more to be gained from incentivizing energy efficiency in a healthcare project versus incentivizing energy efficiency in a school. The integrated design process is a requirement for healthcare projects, but an option on other projects. So again, as you're going through the LEED rating system, you'll see that you'll see some are prerequisites for some projects, but not others. So it's important to make sure you catch those right. Yeah, so let's just jump right into the credits. Location and sites. Sorry, let's start with the integrated process planning. So this is a credit that came out of LEED for healthcare and into LEED version 4, because there is only one version of LEED going forward. The long and short of it, and again, it's listed on the side, so I'm not necessarily going to reiterate it word for word, but you're having a design charrette. You're talking about energy efficiency, water efficiency, and how you can incorporate these into the building. And you're showing that your design is being influenced by that process. There's not a lot of benefit in having a design charrette if you say, well, that was wonderful, you know, crumple up my sticky notes and throw them in the garbage and just design a standard building. So there's some demonstration that that integrated process made some real impact, real change. Location and transportation. So this is similar to sustainable sites. This is talking about where we put buildings and how they're connected to other things. Some of the sustainable sites credits came out of the sustainable sites category and into this new credit category. They're listed here. Again, we're talking about sensitive land protection, which was similar to the sustainable sites site selection credit. High priority sites, so this is redeveloping existing buildings, or and they're very specific about what a brownfield site is. It has to be federally listed, or it has to be on some kind of register as a contaminated site, or a priority redevelopment site, or something like that to get credit for it. It's looking at, now this is interesting, it's a little bit different, surrounding density and diversity of use. So as opposed to one credit that wasn't as specific, you have different levels of points if you're in a dense neighborhood, and a different level of points if you're also in a diverse neighborhood. So you can get multiple points for that. The transit credits are very similar, bike facilities also very similar. The parking footprint follows the Institute of Transportation Engineers handbook, so again, a reference is there for you. And then green vehicles, anti-idling measures for warehouses, etc. What's essentially the same, these are credits that you'll be very familiar with if you've done any LEED projects: construction activity pollution, environmental site assessment, protect and restore habitat, and provide open space. So these are things that haven't really changed at all. So you can see there's quite a lot that's new or has changed, and then there are some things that you'll be familiar with. I guess I should say too, and I said off the top, none of this really changes the benefits or potential LEED recognition of high performance buildings. It's just sort of reprioritizing them and putting a more positive direction on them, and giving more credits where more credit is due, except for envelope commissioning, but we'll get to that later. Sustainable sites, so there's a site assessment process, and this is not an environmental site assessment. This is what architects do day in and day out. They look at a site, they look at topography, they look at the sun-solar path, they look at views, they look at access to nature. It's that type of site assessment. So it's placing that building on the site in a beneficial way for environmental reasons, for occupant comfort and health reasons. It's not an environmental site assessment. So it's important not to confuse the language. Rainwater management is the same. Heat island reduction has changed because now it incorporates non-roof areas too. So the paved areas, which is going to have a significant impact on some projects. Now the solar reflectance index obviously is much, much lower for paved surfaces than it would be for roofs because it's hard to get light-colored hard surfacing, but it's still in there. So now they've taken it from just the roof, no longer just a heat island related to the roof, now it's heat island for the whole site. And the light pollution reduction credit has changed a little bit, includes exterior signage, and there are some other guidelines using the bug rating. Water efficiency. Feel free to interrupt if I might be just kind of going quickly through this, but I am conscious of everyone's time and that, you know, this could be very dry if you're not as enthusiastic about LEED as I am. Indoor water use reduction. So indoor water use is now a prerequisite. Reduction is a prerequisite, which is new. You know, it was possible to get LEED Platinum, well, probably not LEED Platinum, but LEED Gold certainly, and have one of the worst water efficiency performers in existence. So, you know, there's a recognition that water is a very important resource. And, you know, I will also say other cliches like water's the new oil and that kind of thing. Water's important. You know, we take advantage of it or take it for granted because we live on the Great Lakes and we have abundant fresh water around us, but that won't last forever. Take my word for it. I'll try to be a little bit more positive about other things, but water, take care of water. The application, appliance and process water is now included. So your cooling tower, you can't have once-through processes. You can't have high discharge. You can't have certain treatment in there. It's incorporating a more holistic view of water, as opposed to saying I'm only looking at faucets and toilets and maybe a couple of janitor's sinks. You know, it's much broader. It's looking at water everywhere that it's used. There is still same number of points, 2 points if you have a 50% water reduction, and they provide new label references using WaterSense. As I mentioned before, outdoor water use reduction by 30% is a prerequisite, and you use the WaterSense tool to determine what your efficiency rating is for your water. Surprisingly, you now have to have a building water meter on all your LEED projects. That's a prerequisite. So I don't know, it seems unfathomable to me that there are buildings without water meters. I would say probably 80% of single-family homes don't. We just had one installed probably 2 years ago, which was an interesting exercise. Commercial office buildings with a giant pipe coming in from the water main with absolutely no meter on it, no knowledge of water consumption, no knowledge of water discharge. This is just not a requirement. So now it's a requirement. If you're going through LEED version 4, you're going to have to shell out the $500 for a water meter, I'm sorry to say. But again, trying to embed these processes where we can keep track of things, where we can monitor our use, where we can hopefully use that information to make changes. Cooling tower water use included, and you must submeter, or sorry, you get points for submetering end uses of water. So putting a meter on your cooling tower, or putting a meter on your some wash station, or putting water meters on some other process that you have. Yep, there's a question back. There's a baseline. So I can't, for every fixture, there's a baseline flow rate, and then you have to be 30% better than that flow rate. So I think the baseline for toilets is 6 liters per flush. The baseline for commercial faucets is 1.3 liters per minute. The baseline for showers is whatever. So there's some EPA or WaterSense standard for all these types of fixtures and uses. You have to be 30% better than that. It's very similar to the previous water credits. It's the same process, but now the prerequisite is there that you have to be 30% better. Okay, here's a big one, energy and atmosphere. The points have gone up significantly, and they also vary depending on the project type. Sorry, I spoke a little too soon. We're going to talk about commissioning first. Fundamental commissioning is basically the same. The minimum energy performance is also the same, but now we reference ASHRAE 90.1 2010, which is obviously much more stringent than the old, which we were referencing 2007, I think was the previous ASHRAE 90.1. And you can see the points are different. So 1 to 16 points for schools, 1 to 18 points for major renovation, new construction, warehouses, etc., and 1 to 20 points for healthcare. Because again, healthcare buildings, if we took Bala's data and we put healthcare buildings next to multifamily buildings, they would be up on the roof somewhere. I mean, healthcare buildings consume ridiculous amounts of energy. And so energy efficiency in healthcare buildings is vitally important, and it's rewarded as such through the LEED energy rating system. It still is based on cost, not consumption. So this is where that kind of gets a little bit skewed. If we truly are worried about consumption, maybe we should be incentivizing energy reduction as opposed to energy cost reduction, but LEED is looking at energy cost. Again, refrigerant management is the same, renewable energy production is the same, and the green power credits are essentially the same. Maybe some minor changes to points, maybe slight changes to the way they calculate certain things. Commissioning credits have changed. You get more points for commissioning, which is good. The enhanced commissioning is essentially the same, but then they have this new one, which is like enhanced commissioning, plus a monitoring-based commissioning, which is kind of like an ongoing commissioning process. The one that I got a little excited about was envelope commissioning, which is a building envelope forum, so certainly we should talk about building envelope. The challenge I have is that, I was talking about this over lunch, there isn't a thou shalt with envelope commissioning. There are some very specific requirements that you should do, that you must cover as part of the LEED envelope commissioning scope, but it doesn't say you must do 3 design reviews, and you must do this, and you must do this testing, and that testing, and you must do this follow-up, and it doesn't provide that. It says follow the NIBS guideline. The NIBS guideline is a guideline, right? So when a client says, but do I really have to do window testing? Well, it's a guideline. Guidelines don't tell you what you have to do. Guidelines provide you guidance as to what you should or could do, right? So it's still a little bit of a gray area. It is a little bit better. It has a very specific list, but it says something like, verify seasonal performance or verify seasonal testing. What's seasonal testing of a curtain wall system? Is there condensation? Yeah. No, we're good. No problem. Is that seasonal testing? I don't know what seasonal testing is. So still a little gray. I would say that if you're following an envelope commissioning process, there is an ASTM standard, and I'm blanking on the title. I was going to say 1185. That's not right. Anyways, there's an ASTM standard for envelope commissioning, and it follows the fundamental and enhanced categories. And it has very clear definitions and requirements for testing, specifically testing, on fundamental and enhanced envelope commissioning. So as an envelope guy, I would recommend to owners, if you truly want envelope commissioning, you should say that you must follow the ASTM standard, either the fundamental or the enhanced. And then that way everyone is bidding on the same work, and you're getting the same process, as opposed to writing in an RFP, provide envelope commissioning, because it's a little bit of a gray area. When I said I wouldn't go into details on specific credits, envelope commissioning, I just couldn't let it go. Anyways, let's keep moving. Building level energy metering is a prerequisite. This slightly scary thing for some people is that you have to commit to sharing your data with the USGBC or the CAGBC. Building owners I would say some people really hold tightly to that information as their proprietary information for their business. there are all kinds of confidentiality agreements in the LEED process to make sure that that data doesn't get out. But as part of the energy monitoring process, you have to agree to share that data. You could probably get out of it with that last little bullet point that says, you must keep doing that until you change the ownership or the lease agreement. So you could have a particular ownership agreement until the day it's constructed and then change ownership and say, okay, forget it, we're not submitting anymore. Anyways, I'm not going to advise you on how to get out of your commitment to share data with the USGBC, but that might be an option. Advanced energy metering, they've taken out the verification of building performance requirement, which is a bit disappointing. For measurement and verification, you would do the energy model, you would put in all the metering, you would monitor all that, and then you would recalibrate your model and you would verify all that data. That verification process is gone. You're just submitting you're just installing the meters and recording it, and then submitting the data to them. There are some new initiatives around demand response. This, I'm sure, would speak to the heart of BOMA as well. Demand response programs are desirable by a lot of people and certainly help manage the power grid. And so LEED is incorporating those. So when you're doing energy modeling, you can model how your building handles peak demand. And you can instill certain technologies or strategies to help limit peak demand. Peak demand is the very thing that requires us to continue to build power plants, even though for our base load we don't require them anymore, or we won't for another number of years. It's peak demand. Things like that kick on of air conditioning at 11 o'clock in the summer for every single building. That's what kills demand. That's what makes us have to build new power plants. So implementing demand response programs helps offset that need. Power plants are expensive. Okay, materials and resources. It's probably the scariest one for LEED consultants and maybe even for product manufacturers. There are a few out there. There are big changes to the materials and resources credits, so we'll just go quickly through them. It includes things like life cycle assessments, third-party declarations, etc. The storage and collection of recyclables is still there, but there are e-waste requirements now, which is good. Welcome to 2005. Construction waste management, recycled products, FSC, these are all in there, but there's no more credit for FSC wood. FSC wood gets lumped in with your material credit. So it's just another contributor. Still a prerequisite to manage your construction waste. There's a new requirement for healthcare projects to not use anything containing mercury. I don't see why you wouldn't do that on most projects, but anyways, they have incorporated that into as a prerequisite for healthcare projects. What's interesting too is that now you can go through the life cycle process. So you can use a Athena tool. How many people know the Athena tool? Still awake? Good. So you can use the Athena tool to help make your decision on material assemblies, on building durability, life and end of life and disposal, etc. If you demonstrate a 10% reduction in 3 of the 6 impact categories, you get yourself a point. If you do it, right? So again, you could say, oh, I did my Athena model and then I chose to build out of this anyways, because I was doing that for a point. Well, you actually have to do what you discovered was better. It's not one thing just to discover something, you have to do it. But that's encouraging, because it can have a significant impact. So you can see that, we're focusing on operational energy consumption and the environmental impacts associated with that, but also recognizing that leading up to the building construction, there's a significant environmental hit, and then at the building's end of life, there's a significant environmental hit. So this credit is trying to impact those 2 ends of the spectrum. Materials and resources. So again, I said before, the FSC credit is gone. FSC is lumped in with all of the other materials now, contributing towards these points. So you can choose 20 products that meet the criteria, or you can go through the performance method and calculate your performance based on that nice little equation at the bottom, which hopefully is not too small that you can't still read it in your slide printouts. If you can't, you can write it down now. That's fine. This is all inside the reference manual. So again, it's going to a prescriptive or a performance model, not for specific products, but for environmental attributes for products, and putting them all together like an energy performance score. The energy credits don't give you credit for installing a train boiler versus a carrier. It gives you credits based on energy performance. So the material credits are going in the same direction. They're giving you credit for performance. The big change for product manufacturers are these environmental product declarations. So before, if you were doing a LEED project, you would ask for their recycled content, their VOC levels in their products, whether they had urea formaldehyde, where they were fabricated or extracted. All of these things are just now put into separate areas, and the manufacturer has to provide their environmental product declaration. And it's much more encompassing than just those things that I listed. Sourcing of the raw materials is also included in there, but that takes advantage of the recycled content or the FSC wood, those types of things. And then you have to make sure that all the product ingredients are declared. So this is another one of those, maybe head scratchers for manufacturers where they're thinking, but that's my proprietary product. I don't want to list what's in that because that's how I make my bacon. But that's part of the environmental product declaration process. If you get that information, you get credits for it. There is a third option as yet undefined. So we'll see, that's like this page left blank on purpose. When you see that on a report, that's what that one is, option 3. Stay tuned, it should say. So I should mention too that you can use green screen or cradle to cradle, these other types of rating systems that rate products to apply towards this process. Indoor environment quality. Many things have stayed the same. Fortunately, outside air rates, no smoking in buildings, construction indoor air quality management plans, and thermal comfort. So these 2 credits have been combined, the thermal comfort controllability of system and the thermal comfort design, as opposed to having 2 separate credits. What has changed for indoor environment quality? For schools, they've introduced a prerequisite for minimum acoustic performance. So there was some discourse in the building industry about schools that were designed to, meet a certain green building rating system certification level, that they were noisy, or office buildings were noisy, or that, not enough walls, not enough absorptive materials. I can hear my neighbor chewing their gum, and I don't like it. So there's now a acoustic performance prerequisite for schools, because schools, it's required that it be quite quiet so you have a positive teaching environment and it's not distracted. You can also do this, apply this to other projects. So that's kind of an interesting new credit in LEED. So again, this encompasses a couple of other things. So we have CO2 monitoring, and then we have increased ventilation, and it kind of puts them all together under this new enhanced indoor air quality strategies. And what are some of those strategies? Again, this is a snapshot from the reference guide. If you want 1 point, you can do all of those prescriptive things, or select one of the following. So they sort of give you a whole bunch of different options. for different types of buildings, whether you're mechanically ventilated or naturally ventilated, or whether you have a mixed mode system. And they provide you options for how to achieve this point. Everyone loves options, right? There you go. All of the low-emitting materials have all been put in together. So this is all of EQ Credit 4 and furniture. So there's no, there's no longer, I don't know if you remember 4.1, 4.2, 4.3. So all these VOC credits for all these different materials, whether they're sealant or carpet or whatever. That's all lumped together into low-emitting materials. You get 1 to 3 points based on your performance. And it requires 100% compliance. You can do the budget path. If you've ever done a VOC budget path, I applaud you. It is not fun. But you can do it if you want to. It's better to just say, don't bring that stuff into my site, because it's going to cause too many headaches. There are still points. This is not significantly different, but the flush out times have changed. So you do the flush out and or air testing, and you get 1 or 2 credits. So there's a bit more incentive to do that that flush out process to improve the indoor environmental quality before people occupy the building. Lighting controls has changed a little bit, so 90% of individual occupants have individual lighting control for 3 levels. Now, 3 levels doesn't mean 20%, 50%, 75%. It means on, off, or 50%, or mid-level, as they say. Mid-level can be, I think, anywhere from 30 to 70% of total lighting value. So it's not a huge requirement, but at least it's a little bit more controllability than on or off. Controllability of lighting could be on or off before. Now it's on or off and somewhere in between, because if you've ever turned on the bathroom light in the middle of the night, you realize, mid-level is pretty nice sometimes. The other option is use indirect lighting. So this, you can see before this banner went across here in the slide transitions, you could read that if you want, and you could design your building to meet that requirement, I'm sure, or you could use indirect lighting. So it's your choice. A lot of stuff comes down to this. Here's a whole host of requirements, or you basically just do this. So that's why you hire LEED consultants, because they can say, no, just do this. This is what you need to do. All that means do this. So again, I'm not going to go through all the specific lighting requirements, but they're all just slightly different for different types of projects, different levels of control, different levels of lighting. Down here, mid-level is 30% to 70% of the maximum illumination level, not including daylighting. So that doesn't mean it has to be on a dimmer from 30 to 70. It means pick one, that's your mid-level. That's one of your 3 controls. Daylight, now there are 3 options for this. You can use the annual lighting requirement, and I think it's at least 50% of the floor area or at least 50% of the daylight time has to provide a certain amount of luminance per floor area or something. They're very, again, read the reference guide. It's in there, but there are 3 options. You can follow the annual thresholds. You can do the process which was similar to the previous LEED version 2009 process, which is do the model. They did say that the levels of light have changed, so they've gone up a little bit from 250 to 300. And there are some in the annual thresholds, and I think in the model, there are maximum requirements too. So you have to protect against things like glare or too much daylight. So talk about window-wall ratio, more glass isn't always better. And then option 3 speaks more to existing buildings. So this is go around your building with a light meter, do it at least 5 months apart, and measure the actual level of light. That's to sort of overcome barriers like trying to create a light model for an existing building. To go through that exercise might be too costly. Hire a summer student, send them around to take light measurements, plot them on a plan, and submit that as your lighting calculation. I found this quite interesting. So I'm almost done. It goes indoor environmental quality, innovation, and then regional priority. So, like, we've covered 80% of it. It's only 4:30 too. You're not even supposed to be out of here till 5. So, if you've ever designed a building and you saw this credit that said provide views, you probably thought to yourself, well, I think Ted probably brought it up this morning. I'm sitting in my hospital room and I'm staring at a wall 30 feet from me. Is that a view? Do I get credit for that? So now in LEED, there are specific things that qualify as quality view. So it's not just a view, it's a quality view. And some of them are listed here. So multiple lines of sight, at least 90 degrees apart. So I get a window over there and I get a window over there. Great, that's a quality view. I can see nature or movement or sky or, certain things. Unobstructed by frits or patterns or things that are going to, give me vertigo and make me fall over. And then I'll see the view from the skylight. But so they've defined these quality views as opposed to just pure views to help, again, provide a little bit better quality or better outcome from those credits. This is the last indoor environmental quality credit. Now we're on to innovation and regional priority lumped together. 2 more slides, people. 2 more. So 3 strategies you can have for innovation. You can come up with your own significant and measurable environmental performance strategy that's not anywhere else in LEED. A lot of them have been covered, and I think you can also go after previous innovation credits. But if you come up with something that you think is fantastically environmentally high performance, and you submit both the intent and your strategy for doing it and how other people can do the same thing to save the earth, you'll get a point for that. So that's one way. You could follow a pilot credit. So every once in a while, pilot credits come out as they test the market to see, will the construction industry adopt this new thing I'm going to ask them to do in 5 years? You could go after that pilot credit and get an innovation point for that. Or you can go for exemplary performance. So exemplary performance is where you go to the next threshold for any other credit that's already in LEED. So we said prerequisite for water efficiency is 30%. You get 1 or 2 points for 50%, so that's a 20% difference. If I miraculously have 70% water savings, that's exemplary performance for water efficiency. Because I've gone from 30 to 50 to 70. That's 20% jump each time. If another common one was, if you have, if you're required to have 10% recycled content by value, and you get 2 points for 20% recycled content by value. If you have 30%, that's exemplary performance. So it's always the next threshold. And the limiting factor here is that you get 1 point for each of those. So if I have 10%, 20%, if I have 40%, I don't get 2 points. I just get 1 more. And you're only allowed to use 2 of these as part of your innovation strategy. So you can't have 5 innovation credits, all exemplary performance for other credits. You should put your hand in the air, turn it around, give yourself a pat in the back, because you're only getting 2. You get a point for a LEED AP with specialty. So there are legacy LEED APs out there who took their LEED test several years ago and didn't upgrade their credential. So the Green Building Certification Institute now oversees the credentialing process. Credentialing is like a lot of other professional bodies that people are members of. You have to take ongoing education, such as these types of events. You have to maintain your credential and recertify yourself every 2 years. I think it's 30 hours of training in your specialty. So your lead consultant, whoever is your designated lead AP, they have to have their specialty in order for you to get this credit. You can't use a legacy lead AP. So I don't know if I'm belaboring the point, but I think it was maybe 4 or or so years ago, they said, we now have LEED specialties, and we're going to introduce credential maintenance plans, and we're going to provide a little bit more rigor to this LEED AP credential. And they said, you can upgrade right now for free, but you have to agree to do credential maintenance. Or you can keep your legacy LEED AP, call yourself a LEED AP until you're in a pine box, but you can't be considered a current LEED AP, and you will not get a specialty. If you missed your window on that, you have to go through the whole process again, become a LEED Green Associate, work on some projects, take your AP test for your specialty, and then get your specialty. So you essentially keep your LEED AP, call yourself a LEED AP, you're a legacy LEED AP, but you don't have a specialty. No problem, you can just keep doing that. Or you can opt in, but you must maintain your credential. So just make sure you, if you are pursuing a LEED project and you have a LEED consultant, make sure they have their specialty for the rating system that you're pursuing. And there are specialties for all of these systems. Second last slide. Regional priority, so this is similar to LEED 2009. Within each region, Green Building Councils decide what's important to them. Canada Green Building Council has come up with regional priorities for the entire country. And so these are credits that have specific benefit based on local issues, whether it's flooding or whether it's particulate emissions or whether it's protection of open space or whatever. So they take existing credits, they say, these are regional priorities, and you get extra credit for those if you pursue those in those regions. So that's regional priority. The durable building credit used to fit under regional priority in version 2009 because they took it out of 1.1. It used to be a materials and resources credit. And some jurisdictions put a lot of weight on building durability, so you will get a regional priority for that credit, likely in addition to envelope commissioning. So again, we haven't tested the waters yet because this slide's wrong. The grace period in Canada has been extended till October 2016, not next month. So breathe easy. You could cross that out and say, October 2016, exclamation point. So you get a little bit more time to absorb all this for people to get up to speed on LEED version 4 because it is a significant change. The LEED AP tests will also be revised then. We do expect that there's going to be some, there's going to be some pain in this process. Anytime you change the process, people have to get reacquainted with it. But I would say, largely this is, this is a change or a challenge or it's more of an issue for the person who's actually administering the LEED process than it is for the designer or the building owner who wants a high-performance building. High-performance buildings get rewarded. That's the short answer. But there are still changes to the process which will challenge the people who are managing and implementing that process.